Welcome everyone to another episode. On today's episode, I interview a creative entrepreneur, yoga teacher, and mindfulness coach who's played 8 years of professional hockey, including 4 years as an NHL enforcer with the Philadelphia Flyers. He's a co-founder of Body Check Wellness, who specialize in organically grown hemp-derived CBD extracts and functional mushroom blends. He's also the co-host of Nasty Knuckles podcast and founder of Cote Culture, where he incorporates yoga, plant medicine, including cannabis, and mindfulness to help others optimize their self-care and heal. Lastly, he's involved with Wake, a global leader in psilocybin and medicinal mushroom supplements and research, and Athletes for Care, a nonprofit for athletes by athletes. Lots and lots of stuff for us to talk about today. On today's episode of Welcome to the Winner Circle, Riley Cote. Welcome to the Winner Circle.
Thanks for having me. It's great to see you.
Great to see you. So,
been a long time.
It's been a long time, and you've been up to so many amazing things that we kind of talked about briefly before this recording, and I'm so excited to get them in this episode. Lots of stuff to talk about, but the goal of these episodes is to really uplift, inspire, and empower others. So we try to keep it positive and focus on all the abundance and light which is in front of us at our choosing. So the first question sets us up for that. There's a lot of chaos going on in the world right now, but really there's chaos going on at all times, always. So let's focus on some of that light, some of that love. Riley Cote, what do you love about your world right now?
Wow, there's so much to love, so much to be grateful for. You got to turn off the media, and tune out the noise. But you know what? The last couple of years, thank God, I've had some sort of spiritual practice going into COVID, because I feel like I feel stronger now mentally and spiritually than I ever have, and I'm just grateful for all adversities, bumps in the road, and my yoga community that I found, and just community in general that I found in the last couple of years. I know COVID has been challenging for everyone on this planet, but there's a silver lining in it all. In 2 years, you can do a lot with that time to self-reflect and start doing the work and start, finding, tapping into something larger than yourself. And I think, thank God, like I said, I had that platform, and I'm just grateful for that. And I've been able to actually move some pieces along with my business, business ventures, as well as my own, spiritual journey. I've been able to level up and find some peace in this all somehow. So yeah, I'm a lot I'm grateful for. I got 2 young daughters that are healthy, and been able to navigate the mask mandates with some private schooling pod stuff, which has been interesting. But again, it's stuff that I believe in, and important for my children. And yeah, happy to find a nice positive community here.
Right on. So much to be grateful for, and I'm excited to delve into all these things. But before we do, I listed many hats that you wear currently and in the past, and you listed a few others in this with things you're grateful for, your daughters. So in all these roles you wear, whether that be as an entrepreneur, as a father, as a podcast host, as a co-founder of Body Check Wellness, et cetera, all these things that you do, what is the overarching mission that guides you in all that you do?
You know what? It's the overall arching mission for me is improving mental health and spiritual wellness, and then everything that I'm into falls under that umbrella of human optimization, if you will. It's healing first of all, right? We got to get through the weeds, and then it's taking it to that next level. Maximizing human potential. I'm a huge believer in energy and the mind, obviously, as far as your thoughts and the whole bit, but it really all comes under the umbrella of healing, human optimization, and we're spiritual beings, and I feel like the spiritual conversation is tough for some people, but we can't ignore it. And I really feel like I have a role to play into generating this conversation in my community and abroad, and just being honest with it. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
pieces to all this, but yeah, they're all kind of there to support the physical body, the mind, and the spirit, and just trying to educate people. I mean, there's always been a spiritual war, right? We've always been in one, and I think it's very apparent right now. But these tools have kind of been almost forgotten, right? I mean, I think there's been like a disconnect from the spiritual world, and I think that's intentional, right? I mean, they don't want us too close to God or understanding that divine energy, so you slowly chop out spirit, through the food industry, through substances like alcohol and some of these pharmaceutical drugs that despirit people. You've seen, we grew up in Winnipeg, right? I mean, there's a lot of Native Americans around, and you look at, what's happened with that culture, and it's unfortunate that, this is what globalists try and do, right? Is try and despirit people and weaken them. So there's a huge body of work here to do to help raise spirits up and help people reconnect. So I know it's a little bit deep-winded answer there, but I just feel called to do this work.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to break into this some more. So let's talk about the foundational pieces that keep you spiritually, mentally, and physically well. What are your essential self-care practices that you implement in all these dimensions that are working for you today?
Well, yoga is a philosophy, right? The umbrella term of yoga, obviously the physical practice of yoga, meditation, breathing. I mean, those three things. I mean, without them, I'm not exactly sure. I'm not exactly sure where I'd be. Probably be belly up, somewhere based on my past. But yeah, you know what? Growing up, being a hockey player and being so into the physical body and thinking that like we are the physical body, and I became a fighter in hockey and the whole bit. I was so consumed by this element of just the physical body. So when I retired from playing, I realized like everything that I was doing was incorrect. It was just like it was not in alignment, I guess, if you will. But I always realized that my physical body was some sort of vessel, and I was very egocentric and living in this really materialistic bubble playing hockey, which I realized kind of like towards the end, like, wow, I'm like, this is pretty shallow stuff. But realized that my physical body like is a vessel for me to, well, first of all, to heal, because there's a lot of stuff I was dealing with, but then to be able to take the physical body and be able to use that as almost like a teaching tool, right? And then really got into the meditation, understanding the mind, and realizing, geez, I'm like, I wish I had learned this a long time ago, understood this to some degree, right? And integrated it all. So meditation, like I don't think I sat still once in my whole life up until I retired at the age of 28, and then to understand the importance of finding stillness and finding peace. And I grew up in a real structured home as far as like religion goes. I went to church a lot and all that stuff, Protestant, Christian, and a lot of the teachings never necessarily resonated with me. And there was just a lot of holes in some of the narratives. But I feel like with the yoga philosophy has helped me make sense of not just my religion growing up. I would consider myself, spiritual, not religious anymore, but then some other religions, just studying religion in general and spirituality, is that really they're all kind of saying the same thing. I just find that the yoga philosophy incorporates the physical body and talks about, actually gives you some sort of tools to meditate and to find posture and to to purify and cleanse the physical body, which I found like, the Bible itself doesn't necessarily talk about that. So I connected with yoga for that reason. I was able to really tap into some of these dimensions I probably would never have if I had not been introduced to the yoga philosophy. So quieting the mind, like first thing in the morning, I meditate and do a little breath work. Every day is a little bit different, right? I'm not every single day am I doing the physical practice of yoga, but without the combination of all these things, and then nutritional healing, I'm super into nutrition, which is just an extension of this body of awareness. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot that goes into wellness, but certainly I have a huge focus on the mind and really emphasizing, meditative states and really trying to, get out of the thinking mind and try and live through the heart, right? I mean, it's the teachings of yoga. It's the same thing that the psychedelic world kind of teaches us, but just trying to live and embody what I've learned through the last 10 years or so.
So what opened your eyes that 10 years ago and help you see? You grew up in a Protestant Christian religion, so that wasn't like where you learned it. You grew up in the hockey world where yoga and spirituality for sure was not open and like very popular at all. So what opened your eyes to the yoga philosophy and led to these changes 10 years ago or so?
Yeah, it was. I guess it was 12 years ago, really. I mean, I retired in 2010 from playing. I was 28 years old, and it was a combination of the physical grind of hockey. I was a fighter again. I was living a hard life, man. I was like, as hard as I was going on the ice, I was going off the ice. I had some substance abuse issues. I had some concussion related issues. It just I just didn't feel fulfilled, spiritually. I was living my dream, playing the NHL, making the most money I ever made in my life, and yet I just didn't feel that sense of happiness and joy, fulfillment. So there was like a lot of deep digging, and I'm trying to figure out like where this is coming from. And I was just realizing like, wow, like Riley, you got some issues you got to take care of here. You're not in alignment. So it was right around the time I retired. I kind of had a lot of aha moments kind of all at the same time around cannabis, around some other plant medicines like psilocybin, but also around yoga to some degree. It took a little bit longer for me to understand the complexity of the yoga philosophy, but I had just substituted the heavy lifting. I was, I think the heaviest I was playing at was 220 pounds, like $185 now soaking wet. But it was like, transitioning from this real stressful, heavy lifting type of workouts to this physical practice of yoga. So that's the beginning of it. Again, it was shallow thinking. It was just the physical body. I didn't understand the mental component, the spiritual component behind it all. But then as I started practicing more, you know how it is, right? I mean, you just start connecting more, and you start maybe shedding some of the old skin, and then you start, having some just general increase of awareness around what you're doing. And then I started reading about yoga and started studying the Yoga Sutras and read the Bhagavad Gita, and you know what I mean, and started really like appreciating the scriptures and making sense of them, and then like understanding the mind. So it was just like it was just like getting punched in the face enough and grinding my body enough to almost cornering myself is where I had to make a decision. And then just like getting to the physical practice of yoga just opened up my mind in this world of mindfulness and just trying to live more skillfully, if you will, right? I mean, I was just like raised as a hard worker, like just go out and be the hardest worker, and and have a good attitude, right? That was kind of like my upbringing, which is great, right? I mean, pretty solid foundation, but I wasn't exactly a smart worker, so I had to kind of soften, if you will, and live a little bit more compassionately. And I realized all this stuff, it's kind of, it's just like an evolution. And it's just, but the more I started adapting to this and started making changes, the more in alignment I felt. I just felt like I didn't know what the next day was going to hold or where I was going, but in my heart, I just felt like this was right. And it just goes back to all this, cliche sayings of follow your heart or follow your gut, and all this stuff. And Yeah, it was interesting time because there was a lot of like unknowns, right? I mean, I grew up playing hockey my whole life, and and lived my dream, and all of a sudden I retired on my own time. I had another full year contract with the Flyers that I cashed in, and basically did it because the money didn't mean anything to me, it wasn't about that. I started to have all these kind of like aha moments around like what is important to you, like what is the real purpose of life. Because growing up it was like wearing an NHL jersey, making money and living this life, right? I mean, partying, all this stuff, and it's like that's not what life is about. So long-winded, but it was just that hard life of hockey and the grind, and the concussions and all this stuff that just forced me to either make a change or I was going to keep going down this path. And I'd probably be like a lot of these guys where, substance abuse programs, and you never really kind of get out of this darkness. And it's a shame, but thank God I did and was able to find my way.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank God for you and everyone that you're inspiring and helping along your path. So what does life mean to you today, Riley? And how are you serving? How are you giving back this knowledge that you've learned on your journey to others and all the work that you do?
Well, I think the biggest thing I've learned is to, again, it sounds cliche, but is to really enjoy the present moment and to live in the present moment, because the past is the past, the future's not here yet, and it's nor is it guaranteed. Appreciating the journey in the present moment and not getting too far ahead of it. Yes, we have visions of what we're trying to accomplish, and there's goals, and we write things down, but I think being able to just enjoy the little things, the mornings by myself in quiet space, being present with my kids, which is still, still a challenge. I find myself trying to juggle some balls and not giving them the exact tension I need sometimes. And I find myself, wow, Riley, this is like, you're trying to teach this to people. You gotta be practicing a little bit better. So, just trying to be present with everything I do, and finding joy in it. Right. Because that's, I think, a real spiritual practice is when you can find joy in the journey and not thinking that you're going to find joy when you find the end result. So that's the way I used to think. So that, and what was the second part of your question there?
I think we could just spin off into that joy and the importance of enjoying the process of finding that joy rather than being so destination oriented. And I think that's where
Right.
a lot of people get stuck. But in that path of pursuing joy, resistance come up, and author Stephen Pressfield describes resistance as that negative force that keep people from fulfilling their dreams. So it's the thing that keeps you in bed rather than waking up early and doing your meditation practice, or it's that thing that keeps you from going to the gym because it's too cold outside, or it's the thing that keeps you from journaling because something you're not used to doing, or it's the thing that keeps you from going to yoga class because that's the thing only women do, which
Yeah.
a lot of men think. So how do you overcome resistance? How do you overcome that part of you that tries to keep you safe in your comfort zone, not stepping into the unknown? How do you face resistance on the daily and overcome it?
Oh, geez. I mean, that's a good question. You know what? I think, part of it for me comes from my upbringing. I had a paper route in Winnipeg there at the age of 8 years old. I was grinding in the Winnipeg winters, from a young age, and had that ingrained into me, the hustle, whether it was, my purpose of life. Obviously delivering papers at 8 years old, it wasn't my purpose in life. However, it did help me understand challenges and adversities, and what I mean, and getting uncomfortable, at a young age. So I got used to being uncomfortable and being comfortable being uncomfortable, almost, if that makes any sense. At a
Mhm.
young age, obviously not bringing any awareness to it, understanding it as a spiritual teaching. But then, then moving on to my hockey career, my role as a youth hockey player, and even a junior hockey player, was much different than when I landed up, turning pro. But I was always like, I always like wanted to be the hardest worker, and I always pushed myself almost to fault, almost, where I felt like guilty if I didn't take days off, or if I did take a day off, I felt guilty. So I just like almost grinded myself to the ground almost. Or again, being uncomfortable, dealing with adversity, but I thought that was like, you know, what I needed to do. And I think partly it served its purpose, but unfortunately, like living like that isn't very sustainable either, especially when you talk about the science of recovery and regeneration. But, you know, so then the hockey, the dream, you know, that fueled me during my hockey career. And then when the dream was, you know, over and, you know, I moved on into this next phase of my life, you know, I got into coaching. I was coaching the Flyers minor league team, and I knew that that wasn't what I wanted to do, like long term. That wasn't like my mission in life. But that was when I started embarking on this quest of holism and healing and wellness. And then it was just like, it was almost like find these different dimensions of energy and feeling better and better is really like, holy, like just there's something here, and this is like exciting. And I think that all together, you know, again, the spiritual practice, all these pieces, I realized that like I'm here for some specific mission, and you know, and at that time I didn't exactly know what it was, but I'm like, I gotta like be some sort of lead. I even really need to be a leader and leader in the community and leader in wellness, because I'm realizing like a lot of people around me are like physically sick, mentally sick, you know, spiritually bankrupt. And I'm like, I'm starting to bring awareness to this. So I'm like, oh, geez, I'm like, I got a big job to do here. And that to me, that's what gets me out of bed now. It's no longer waking up in the morning and squatting 490 pounds. You know, it's like I'm done with that grind and that adversity and challenge. But it's, you know, getting up early before the sun rises, and getting my spiritual practice or part of it out of the way, connecting and grounding and all that good stuff. Where that to me is an element of self-preservation, but it's an element of like increasing energy so I can do this for long periods of time with a sustainable approach to to my mission, right? I mean, I need to take care of the physical body and the mind for me to actually do, you know, the work I need to do. So I think it's just a mixture of knowing that the world needs a lot of assistance now, and then I've been fortunate enough to be in a position to be one of these called on people to help move the needle along, bring awareness, you know, bang the drum, whatever that lands up being. So that's exciting. You know, I mean, I love it. And you know, it's just like getting up in the morning is easy. You know, it's getting up in the morning.
Yeah.
Well, it's also easy because I'm not staying up till 3 a.m. in the morning getting shit faced either. So, you know what I mean? My perspective on life has changed. My priorities have changed. And obviously I'm preparing my body and mind to be able to get up early in the morning, because I mean, if I was living the way I used to, there's no way I could do it. But yeah, it's something powerful, you know, calling here. So
It's a real win-win, because in order to lead others to that place of joy, that peace, that inner calm, that place of yoga, you have to lead by example. So that starts with the self, and you put in the work, change yourself to change others. And I think that's something that you're
yeah.
truly doing. One big ally on your path has been plant medicines. And just reading up and listening to some of the stuff that you've put out there, plant medicines have been in your life for a long time, in the form of cannabis, psilocybin when you're younger, but you were using those more recreationally. When did that take a turn? When did you realize the medicinal properties of those plants that I mentioned, psilocybin, cannabis, and then the many other plants you've met and learned and experienced along the way that has helped you to see as you see now?
Yeah. So it wasn't until 2010 when I retired from playing, when I really started to make the connection around these plant, well, at the time I wouldn't call them plant medicines, but the plant medicines were, you know, therapeutic and medicinal the whole time. So again, I had been introduced to cannabis and psilocybin around 15 years old, and used cannabis my whole junior hockey career, my whole pro hockey career. But, you know, misused it, right? I mean, it was really early on, it was very recreational, drinking. It was like looked upon as just like a party drug. I didn't understand it, didn't know anything about it. I wasn't reading books about it. No one was telling me about it. There was no manual around it. So like most people, I mean, you're probably right there with everyone else as far as figuring this out on your own, right?
Yeah.
However, there was a point where I started to just kind of like realize, wow, I'm like really sleep well with this, by itself, when I kind of removed the alcohol from consumption of consumption of cannabis. And when I turned pro when I was 20, that's when I started fighting for a living, and I was fighting 35 times a year. So outside of performance anxiety, there was this element of anxiety that I was, fighting anxiety. It was like this fight or flight response where I was like caught in the middle of it. It was chronic state of anxiety. That's when I kind of like could at least put a finger on like, wow, this is kind of like really helping me calm the nervous system and help me just relax, where I can go and fight the biggest idiot the next night and not really lose any sleep over it. Where I know a lot of guys that weren't cannabis users were like stay up late and drink, and they get all, what I mean? They get all jacked up in a different way. I made some sort of connections there, but again, I was, my head was in the sand. I was just like, still full throttle, just misusing cannabis, overusing it. But it wasn't until I retired in 2010, I had 2 surgeries at the end of that season, one on my wrist and one on my nose, probably another 2. But nonetheless, I told myself that I was going to use cannabis only on the back end of these surgeries. I was gonna throw away the pills because I had some substance abuse issues with like Ambien and painkillers on the road and booze and all that stuff. So it was just kind of like one of these agreements with myself, like let's prove to myself that we can use cannabis on the back end of this, and just cannabis. So I threw the prescription drugs away and just used cannabis, and I didn't tell anybody. I just like did it, to self experiment, if you will. And it was right around that time, like, and I read a book called Hemp for Health, and it was like the science of the cannabis plant, as a medicinal tool. So all these minor cannabinoids, CBD, the CBG, all this stuff. But hemp is an industrial resource for the fibers and the fuel and the food and all that good stuff. But I started to make sense of like some of my experiences that I had with cannabis the last like 10, 12 years. Around its therapeutic values. I kind of made the connection, experience now validated by science. I was like, oh man, I'm like, I've been medicating this whole time, I didn't like really look at it like that, right? It was just like the way society looked at it was like, you're just a stoner, you're just getting high. Well, apparently I was doing some sort of therapeutic using some sort of therapeutic tool without even really knowing it. But in that moment, I realized, wow, like, CBD, there's a neuroprotectant element to this, creating neurogenesis, me being punched in the face, 2,000 times might make sense for me to start using this with a little more mindfulness and a little bit different approach. So that was when I really started to use cannabis. I still use cannabis like traditionally with flower, burning it that way. But also using, high CBD varieties of cannabis to target the brain, right? And how with brain regeneration and help maybe minimize some of the collateral damage that it caused through fighting and partying, whatever else. So a completely different perspective on cannabis, different delivery systems. And then everything changed after that. My relationship with cannabis changed. My relationship with food changed. My relationship with alcohol changed. Much similar learnings around psilocybin. I kind of had the aha moment right around the cannabis one, around mushrooms, right? It was like, oh geez, I mean, neurogenesis, neuroprotection, spirituality, like all this stuff. I'm like, wow, like, because I had some profound experiences on mushrooms growing up, but like a lot of times we're fogged out with some alcohol and also with distractions of people and this, that, right? You're not really finding stillness, you're not quieting the mind, right? Then using them, in a more of a meditative state, you get a completely different result. So then it was kind of all at once. Like, wow, I'm like, I don't need any of this crap that I've been throwing down my throat. I stopped drinking for a year, detox. I eventually had like, a couple of drinks now and then. I haven't drank in over 2 years now. I just completely eliminated it because I just feel like it was just like interfering. The energy was interfering with my production and my mind and my performance. But yeah, I started using these tools mindfully, intentionally, there's like this microdose element. There's just like dose, right? The medicines in the dose type of deal where I was like, oh geez, I've been misusing these tools the whole time. So now let's like, sit back and just use these things the right way and find healing. So yeah, that's been it. My relationship with cannabis, even since 2010, has evolved significantly. Where I actually did an interview earlier today around just like I use less cannabis than I ever have, and it's just I'm more into like this microdose phase of like 2.5 milligrams of THC and just very, very specific and intentional doses when I do use it. And the same thing with psilocybin when I do is very intentional, right? Yeah, the relationships changed over time, and I would imagine it will continue to change, right? I mean, you kind of learn more about the medicine, the self, you learn more about yourself, and as you heal yourself too, right? I mean, yoga is complementary to some of these pain management and anti-inflammatory tools. So, as stiff as I was when I retired, I probably needed more. And now, since I'm doing all these other things, I feel like I'm using less and less. And that's just, for me personally, but it's been amazing allies, right? I mean, it's like, wow, had I known this, 12, 13 years before, I know, shoulda, woulda, coulda, and no one was really given the manual unless you had a mom and dad that were, a straight up cannabinoid doctors or something like that were, giving their kids that information. But most people misused it. But I think, now with the understanding of these medicines and their potential for improving not just physical health, mental health, and spiritual health. And they've been just all amazing tools for me along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're sharing these medicines with people now with Body Check Wellness, a company that you co-founded. So could you just kind of talk a bit about that company, why you founded it, what kind of products you offer? And then if you can just get into the benefits, like the benefits of cannabis and psilocybin in terms of the neurogenesis and just in terms of brain health, I'd be super curious to learn more about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Body Check Wellness is a hemp-derived CBD and functional mushroom company. So in the US, we have different laws than you guys have in Canada. I know you guys have full legalization, medical as well as adult use. Here, it's interesting how the cannabis landscape landed up playing out, where they have this farm bill that was introduced in 2018, which opened up cannabinoid extraction and cannabinoid products through the farm bill. It had to be grown below 0.3% THC under the guise of hemp, but nonetheless highly beneficial. For again, calming the nervous system, promoting a good night's rest, and helping with the brain. So, and it opened up this door for non-cannabis users to find supplements that were cannabis based, right? I mean, there was just no high associated with it. So, the soccer mom and just the casual hockey dad or whatever it is, anybody just trying to find some sort of element of wellness without having to go and buying marijuana products through a dispensary or on the black market, and then getting into the world of like impairment, if you will, or getting high, right? So, and then we're compounding these cannabinoids with different functional mushrooms, legal functional mushrooms like lion's mane, cordyceps, reishi, turkey tail, agarikon, the common 5 or 6 ones that most people are aware of. Which are essentially adaptogens that work with stress responses and help the body manage stress. And then, they also help with focus and clarity. They're probiotics, and they help with the gut and the whole connection between the GI and the brain. So there's element of recovery, but also optimization, just basic wellness. And that's really Body Check Wellness in a nutshell. Sold over the counter outside of the dispensary model because of the laws itself. I know in Canada, I think all cannabinoids have to come from a dispensary model. So we sold it like different health food stores and chiropractors and dentists, stuff like that. That anywhere that they're trying to help people manage inflammation and sleep. It's a really good tool to complement whatever else they're using. And then, on the second part of your question around like what these cannabinoids are doing for the brain. I mean, I'm no scientist, but from what I understand from the U.S. patent, the U.S. the US government holds a patent on cannabinoids as neuroprotectants and antioxidants. And I think the simplest way to understand it is the cannabinoids, specifically CBD, maybe CBG, maybe a couple other ones, are highly anti-inflammatory. So from that perspective, everything in the body, disease state, or ailments, or any sort of lactic acid, everything is inflammation, right? So in the brain itself as well, right? There's inflammation. So it helps remove and flush inflammation, but there's also this element of neuroregeneration, and as well as the neuroprotectant properties. So outside of just protecting the brain, there's the science to support that some of these specific cannabinoids can help promote neurogenesis and actually a new brain cell growth or reconnectivity, neuroplasticity, whatever term you want to throw on it. So that to me was like the entry point for me fully going nose deep into this, because I was like, wow, there's so many other people that not just have like concussion related issues, but just the mental health related issues, right? I mean, just helping support the brain in a real positive manner. And I do want to make it clear, like, when you talk about cannabis as a neuroprotectant, people have kind of like challenged me, well, like, oh, smoking weed all day is going to help with your brain. Are you crazy? I was like, well, no, I'm not. That's not what I'm saying, right? I mean, there's a big difference between being an extreme adult use recreational smoker or dabber, or whatever that lands up being, high concentration of THC, versus like, mindfully using some of these minor cannabinoids to improve brain health. So just want to make that clear, because I am not a huge supporter of substance abuse, right? So I mean, I see this in the cannabis space where it's like 90% THC dabs, and they're doing 3-gram dabs of some sort, and it's just like absolutely unnecessary. And I would probably agree with people that say, well, that would probably affect the brain in a negative way, which I don't know if that's the case or not, but maybe. But I think at the end of the day, if you want to talk about this from like a drug diversion standpoint, or just helping people get off harder drugs, like cannabis is a much safer play, right? Even if people abuse it, at least they're going to wake up the next morning. You're not going to die of an overdose, and it doesn't have these harsh side effects like some of these other drugs do. So the brain forever will that be like my, like, say, like the spine of where I'm trying to go with this, because again, we've all been told that the cannabis is like terrible for your brain, and this is your brain on drugs and all this stuff. But I think it's been misrepresented. I think the underground market has driven this THC content through the roof, and there's like now this imbalance in the cannabis plants. So now we almost have to be extra mindful when we're using cannabis, because a lot of people, overconsume, right? Even if it's like a small amount, they'll overconsume, and then they have a bad experience, and then it's like, oh well, I didn't love cannabis. It didn't really help me. I felt a little bit anxious, a little bit paranoid. Well, generally it's because you're over-consuming. So it's a fine line now. The varieties of cannabis are so high in THC that, for an average cannabis user or a new cannabis user, like the whole less is more, like go less, even less than you think. You can always take more, but once you've ingested it, you can't retract on it. So there's a science behind, obviously, dosing, always depending on what you're trying to accomplish. If it's brain injury, that's one thing. If it's colitis, it's a different thing. If it's just pain management or sleep, it's completely different, right? So I think that's the beautiful thing. But highly anti-inflammatory, again, calming the nervous system, promoting good night's rest. And I think that's when we do most of our healing. So yeah, it's been amazing.
I think awareness is so key. Awareness on why you're doing something, and even if you're doing a 90% dab, maybe like that it's something you need. It's all this is a form of self-medication, but it's using that 90% THC dab to help you move somewhere else, not just staying in the same place, taking that dab over and over in perpetuity. Because that's just putting band-aids on wounds. It's bringing awareness to why we have a wound, and then getting at the core of that wound and creating our healing. I think that is so important. The intention, awareness, and getting at the wound, rather like at the core of the wound, rather than just putting that band-aid, whether that be cannabis or alcohol or online shopping or sex or internet, anything. They're all forms of self-medication. And if you're self-medication, like Dr. Gabor Mate, someone that I really respect and admire, he says, congratulations that you found cannabis. Congratulations that you found whatever that is that you found that is helping you get through the day. But it's using those self-medications to move forward, to get at the healing of that wound, rather than just temporarily putting it on and having to rely on it in perpetuity.
100%. No, I agree with that. Just to build off that, you see that a lot. You see the people that use it, I again misuse it even when I thought I was using it, properly, but it's like it was serving its purpose in that moment for where I needed to be, but it was helping me get to the next step. It was helping me get to the next level. And then eventually you maybe don't need as much, but it's just like everyone's at a different part of their healing. And I don't want to downplay, the 90% dab, because some people really do need it, right? I mean, there's people that are really struggling. If that can help them get to the next step, the next day, then that's a great thing. But I think like where I see is a lot of people resist the work, right? I mean, because it's like this is where like growth happens, right? Is like you actually got to do the work. You can't just medicate all day, and then expect like things to really get that much better. So people resist the challenge, resist the change, and actually doing the work. Like you said, getting the core of the healing. You got to do the work, right? So I think that's where it gets like, I say complicated. It's not a complicated concept. It's just wrapping your head around how much work you actually got to put into how uncomfortable you actually have to get, because you're going to get uncomfortable one way or the other. It's either you choose to be uncomfortable to find growth, or Mother Nature is just going to start moving you in uncomfortable. You know what I mean? And it's going to do it. It will do it one way or the other, and then you're going to have to deal with it in another uncomfortable manner. So I think that is really, I always try and tell people is like, cannabis is great. All these tools are great. But if you're using them without doing the work, you're going to be spinning your tires for years, years and years. You really never get out of that rut. So
and you get nudges. The universe gives you nudges. They start softly and they get a bit harder, and then eventually it's going to be like an overhand right from the universe across the jaw. That's going to smack you on your ass, and you're going to have no option. You're going to have no option but to right your way or continue the downward fall. So you are helping other athletes with Athletes for Care. Can you just kind of talk to us a bit about what that nonprofit is, and what is the scene in athletics today versus when you were playing? Enforcers and fighting is a lot less common in hockey, but there's still issue of concussions, fighting or not. In hockey, soccer, and MMA, boxing, it's a rising issue. Talk to us about Athletes for Care, and what does the landscape amongst athletes look like now?
So Athletes for Care, I'm one of the co-founders of Athletes for Care. It's a nonprofit, and we started, I guess, 7 years ago now. And it was, as I started speaking more publicly around cannabis and how cannabis helped, improve my quality of life and help me manage my concussion issues, all these, positive things, was going on the speaking circuit. And I started running into different athletes from different sports that had similar stories of how cannabis helped improve their quality of life, and how cannabis, help them get through dark times and help them transition to the real world with, with some, some sort of form of awareness and empowerment, right? I mean, it's an empowering tool. And then eventually we kind of like came together and said, let's like create like a formal organization that we can use like the sports platform to, at this time, like it was really cannabis centric. It was like really, it's like, let's use the sports platform to educate our communities, our players associations around the positive benefits of cannabis. So we formed Athletes for Care. Actually, the daughter of Ed Snyder, who owned and founded the Flyers back in the day, she's the chair of our board, Lindy Snyder. So we had like a real professional outlook and vision on this whole thing. And eventually we start speaking on panels. We have like 3 or 4 athletes and have like a medical professional researcher there on the panel to kind of support our experiences through science. So we're not just standing there telling stories and people be like, well, there's no science to support that. You're just, blowing smoke. So just make it a little more official and a little more legitimate. And then, eventually it started to grow, where we're realizing there's a lot of guys that struggle when they retire. There's like this whole element of identity crisis. You see this a lot in the military, where guys come back from war, and they come back and they have no purpose, they have no identity, they don't know who they are. And there's a lot of similarities in sports that you've embodied this position as an athlete, right? I mean, I was embodying this role as the enforcer. There's so much of my ego was invested into this role and into this identity, that when it was over, it was like, whoa, and I see that we saw this a lot. Like a lot of guys, that was the biggest thing, is like, well, how do I recreate myself? What's my purpose here? So it was helping us, empower athletes, when a lot of the times they were misusing their tools as well, right? There was substance abuse, and there was this and that, and depression, and it's hard to thrive when you're barely surviving, right? So it was using cannabis to start as a supplement, or a substitute for alcohol and all these other things that you guys are using. And then the business of cannabis, eventually helping these athletes be educated and taking their knowledge and their healing into their communities, and banging the drum. And eventually it morphed into more of this whole wellness thing. We're talking a lot about psychedelics now. Actually, we're going to Jamaica next month with a couple athletes for care members, and then doing a story with ESPN around psychedelics in sports. Mm-hmm. But it was it just evolved from cannabis, because that was 7 years ago, that was like the sexy thing to talk about. Well, even it was probably still early to really be bluntly open about it, but we were. And then, as we're talking about here, cannabis is just one tool in the toolbox, right? So if you want to be well, and if you want to optimize, like you have to expand the toolbox, and nutritional healing, obviously different supplements, and then you're getting the psychedelics, yoga, all these things. So we have over 200 members now. Some very active, some not, but really trying to just raise awareness in the communities. We've engaged in 3 different research initiatives around CBD in the brain, just trying to be on the forefront of science. And now we're doing the same thing with psychedelics, specifically psilocybin, just because that seems to be in the wheelhouse of most of the athletes. It's just more accessible. It just seems to be more remote than ayahuasca, or maybe like peyote or 5-MeO DMT for that matter. Doing the same type of thing, right? Just talking about this in a professional manner, how these tools help support our mental wellness and spiritual wellness. And then it's amazing, it's amazing too, what we've learned just through the cannabis side of things on public perception is so influenced by sports. Like if Tom Brady came out right now, or Wayne Gretzky said, yo, psilocybin mushrooms, this is the future of psychotherapy, and blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Like the whole world, it would shift their perspective, right? Yeah. So you have I'm a nobody athlete in the grand scheme of some of the guys we have, and they get some of the guys that are, doing some of God's work. But like, it's amazing how you can influence the opinion of the public when they see pro athletes, or athletes, doesn't matter, pro, just athletes using some of these tools mindfully. Like, oh, I misunderstood that. I didn't really have that view on it. And hearing them speak, empowers them, or, at the very least, it plants a seed, whether they shift their level of consciousness in that moment or not. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we're trying to do the same thing with psychedelics, as well as the other modalities, is just using the sports platform, not selfishly to just help athletes, right? I mean, that's one dimension of it, but really it's to empower the public and realize that there's more to this world than what we've been told, right? There's more than there's more tools out there. You just got to open your mind a little bit more and do a little reading and research. So yeah, that's kind of it, really. Just trying to use the sports platform to normalize some of these stigmatized alternative medicines, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. You're really leading the way, destigmatizing the use of these medicines for athletes and beyond. This leads me to an interesting question that I'm really curious to hear your answer. How would you advise the use of these medicines, these plant medicines, to youth? So people under the age of 18, because this is when you were starting to use. I think you mentioned in a previous interview you were using started experimenting with recreationally cannabis and psilocybin in your teens. So, what role do these plant medicines have for teenagers whose brains aren't really fully developed? Because there is research out there saying it's not optimal until the brain's fully developed, which is in your early 20s. But again, the research in terms of cannabis, psilocybin, all these plant medicines is so far behind because of the war on drugs. So we're just now starting to do these research. So it's really, there's a lot of unknowns out there. And so this is kind of a controversial one, is like, yeah, how would you how would you advise like a young hockey player or teenager or you when you're 15 on use of cannabis and use of psilocybin? And I think there is a role for them, especially if it's a harm reduction, if they're using meth or if they're using alcohol and you're going to do cannabis. Or but yeah, I don't know, it's just a very interesting topic. I'm here curious to hear your thoughts on.
Yeah, you know what? It's a little bit complicated as far as advice, because I mean I can't legally advise anybody to break the law, right? I wouldn't want to be doing that. But you
Yeah.
know, I understand that young people explore and self-experiment, right? So then it's like you mentioned the harm reduction, right? It's just about, if you're gonna do it, if you're gonna explore, find someone that you trust to maybe hold space for you, and do this in a little bit safer environment, right? I mean, it's like, because people are going to do this with or without government approval, right? Or
Yeah.
with or without the laws allowing them to. um so I think there's so much more information out there now than there has ever been. Is a 16 or 17-year-old looking for education before they're gonna you know consume cannabis or psilocybin? Probably not.
No.
But I think they're relatively both safe. However, in larger doses of psilocybin, and if you're doing it in a setting that's not safe, or there's too much stimuli and distractions, people could freak out. So the advice, geez, I mean, I think if you're going to make the leap to explore, I mean, know first of all what you're putting in your body.
Yeah.
And I think having again, a trusted friend or a couple of them around you in a safe space is the way to do it. Because I mean, I wouldn't recommend doing it some of the, certainly not some of the ways I've done it, and I've been able to speak about it here today. But yeah, because there's just so much mindfulness associated with these are legitimate spiritual medicines, right? I mean specifically the psychedelics in larger doses. So not to be
Hmm.
messed with. I think the other thing is respect. I mean, even if you're talking about alcohol, legally, I mean,
Yeah.
it's like the respect towards any substance. I think that is like the biggest thing, because I've misused every substance known to man. I think most people have to some degree. But if we can understand that element of respect and everything that we come in contact with, we ingest and put in our bodies, element of respect, but safe space. Like this is, at the end of the day, I'm all about drug diversion and harm reduction. So it's like, people will drink before their drinking age, right? And,
Yeah.
and and again, they're not. It's not like, oh yeah, daddy's holding space for you and you can get drunk, and it's like that doesn't really exist. Maybe it does for some people. It's like, okay, drunk in my basement and they don't go out in public. But like, um, you know, I think I think we're further along conscious wise than we were 15, 20 years around some of the stuff. So I feel like we should be able to have more honest conversations around these. Like what I would really like to see, like in say in the junior major junior hockey program in Canada,
Yeah.
like them have like an honest big boy conversation with these guys. Like, listen, like, you know, we're not endorsing cannabis use to you guys, but like, if you're gonna use it, like, you know, have like A, B, and C, like some sort of like, you know, some sort of like help along the way, versus like, if you don't say anything at all, they're just going to go and figure it out on their own with no real guidance. So I feel like, especially in Canada, I feel like they could do a better job around, you know, harm reduction and putting this into context. Because if they're not, then people are just going to go drink themselves to sleep, and, you know, using harder drugs and more productive substances. So probably not a great answer, but I obviously can't endorse illegal activity, but they're going to do it on their own. And if they do, I just would say, like, find respect it, find a safe space, and find someone you trust, and do it in that manner. Because once you start mixing with alcohol in this recreational setting, you're not getting the real value out of these medicines. So
absolutely.
Simplify it.
No, I think that's a great answer, and it's important to have open communication if you're going to use it, and so that you know what you're taking, to respect what you're taking, and setting is so important with any psychedelic drug that you are to use. So much great wisdom shared on this conversation, Riley. I really thank you for it. And this leads us to the final 3 questions I ask every guest. Through all the highs and lows that is this life, that is this hero's journey, what has been the greatest life lesson that you've learned on your path that you feel called to share with me and everyone listening right here and now?
Ooh, that's deep. It might be the element of forgiveness and compassion. I mean, forgiveness to myself, to people, and just like letting go, and just being okay with the way things are, not being so rigid around things like that. Compassion, just like being more compassionate towards people and myself, you know, just moving around and being okay, and more understanding of like the hurt and the suffering that's going on in the world, and just trying to meet people where they are, and, you know, no judgment. And the biggest one that I've been working on a lot lately and bringing a lot of awareness to is trying to have no attachment to result. So just like doing selfless actions and then not having any attachment to the result. And I feel like that generates more peace, where it's like, yes, you want a certain result, but you're not attached to it. So if it doesn't happen and there's no suffering associated with it, if that makes any sense. So really trying to just like to move skillfully and not have that attachment to the end result. And I know it sounds interesting, but it is a spiritual practice, because it does add an element of freedom to you when you're able to do that to some extent. Because most people, it's like we put all this attachment on, you know, getting this job or doing this, and then it's like it generates so much suffering. But I feel like if you can detach to the outcome, you find more peace, you know.
Absolutely. Many threads that you've left for others to unravel, that they could follow and explore those paths themselves. Riley, in 3 words, how will you describe the experience you're having on this earth? Could be a phrase, or could just be 3 separate words. How will you describe the experience you're having on this earth?
Oh, maybe 2 words. Right now, it's simply beautiful. I'm just seeing the beauty of it all, you know, a different perspective than I once had. Not that I was like a pessimist, but yeah, just trying to see the beauty in it all, because it's all perspective. There's always been, you mentioned it earlier, there's always been darkness. There's always been crazy stuff going on, but it's just like, where, you know, where are you focusing your attention? And there's so much beauty, there's so much love out there, you know, there's so much goodness out there. It's just, you know, connecting your vibration with that, and then you know, it's a beautiful world.
Always. And it's, if we choose to see the lens in that way, what lens do we wish to perceive, to observe? And then my final question for you, Riley, we've played around with time. We've examined your past, and I'm going to play around with time. I'm going to fast forward us, and we're going to venture into the future. We're going to be alongside an 85-year-old Riley Cote. Who is this 85-year-old man? Where are you? Who are you surrounded by? What are you doing? And what is the legacy that you left here on your time in this reality, in this dimension?
Wow. Well, I know I will be sharp mentally, sharp spiritually. I will have continued down this path. I've probably traveled the world and probably taught remotely at different, whether retreats or locations, but also have created a serious, footprint in my community and legacy roots, right? I mean, I think community is everything. And it's probably going to be in and around this Philly area. I mean, I don't really see, unless this country goes to shit in the next, 5-10 years, and I'm bouncing out of here, and which I got a couple exit plans, but I would like to stay in around this area because this is what I love Canada. I love Winnipeg, growing up there and the whole thing, but I've made my living around here. I just feel like I owe it to this area to to help them heal, right? Build that community, continue down my path of yoga. I'm going to be teaching yoga till I die.
Heck yeah.
I'm going to be practicing yoga till I die. But yeah, so it just, I've always saw myself in the last 5 years as some sort of spiritual leader, right? I mean, really and again, the physical body is so glorified. We surface level talk about mental health, but to me, this mental health issues are spiritual issues, and I just feel like we need to open up this conversation, and I'm not afraid to do it. And people can challenge me on it all day long. I'm over that. I'm not gonna hurt my feelings if you disagree with me, but I feel like I have a big job to do in the in that spiritual world, and being a spiritual leader.
Beautiful. What an elder you are becoming, and that you are already embodying. Let's stay with that 85-year-old one moment longer. I want you to feel that 85-year-old Riley in your heart, traveling the world, inspiring others, teaching yoga, awakening with the power of medicine. And that 85-year-old, he's going to join us back. He's going to join us back into the now, the infinite now. And he shares with you a message, Riley. What does that 85-year-old Riley share with you, whisper in your ear today?
Just enjoy the moment, find joy in everything you do, and smile more. I think I think it's just it's amazing. So the simplest teachings are the most powerful ones, right? They're the most impact. And one of the things I teach my daughters, not that it's that extraordinary, but I always say choose love, just choose love, and choose love, and it's just if you just understand that, and if you can work out a place of love, to me that's what it'd be. Just live your life through love, through the heart, and get out of the thinking mind, and just try and just be, right? Be human, just be, right? We're stressing ourselves into oblivion here. So I've really appreciated the last, few years learning how to be human, just be, right? I mean, it's seems well, how the hell are we doing? Why are we learning how to be human? It's well, shouldn't we know that? It's I think we've forgotten, right? We've almost forgotten. So
and it starts now.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, right now. It's all we have.
Always. Fuck yeah. I stand for that, Riley. It's been an honor. It's been a pleasure connecting with you and sharing your story, your hero's journey. For others wanting to follow along with you, they can check you out on your website, rileycote.com. And you're also very active on Instagram at rileycote32, where you also have a link tree that will send you to all those amazing companies and organizations you're a part of: Body Check Wellness, Cote Culture, Athletes for Care, Wake, and the Empowered Wellness Studio, where you're teaching at in Wilmington, Delaware. So much great things. Anywhere else I could send them, Riley?
I think that's it. Yeah, I almost got too many things going on, but yeah, I'm not hard to find, and Yeah, I mean, reach out, say hi, questions. I mean, I'm always open to connect with people that are on the path. So
Right on. To close every episode, we bring our fist in, a digital fist bump. Boom. A choice to step into the winner circle, a choice that we can make if we choose. The greatest tool at our disposal, and that is choice. Thank you so much, Riley.
thank you. Appreciate it. It's great.
Appreciate you.